All right. Welcome back to the Stronghold Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Barton. And today we have my guest, Eli Burkman, in studio. This always is going to probably look like a different studio. It's makeshift, kind of playing around with what sounds good, what looks good. Plus, this is at my local church. So thank you for that.
The rental fee, it's totally worth it. So.
Yeah, it'll be covered in my my offering towards the new building and facilities. As long as that new building and facilities, Jeremiah, if you're listening, has a podcast studio in it, that would be great. But the way we like to do it on the Stronghold, Eli, is I like to introduce my guest. And so I'm just going to run through a few things, give you a chance to introduce yourself, and we'll be rolling. So welcome to the Stronghold.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
And I don't know if you listened to any of the episodes before this, but I always like to kind of get
an avid listener.
Okay.
Well, heard them all.
That's why Eli is one of my favorites. Eli also brought me coffee right before this podcast. So the bar has been set for future guests. Thank you for that.
Hoping to get some softball questions because of this payment here.
Well, I tell you what, I like to do a little bit of research on my guests, and I usually reach out for some inside information from people closest to you. And yours are pretty nice. And so
you must not know me very well.
Yeah. I won't reveal my source. I don't like to do that. You'll probably be able to piece this together. But so Eli Burkman is the assistant regional pastor, or assistant to the regional pastor, or wait.
Assistant to the regional.
Yeah, associate pastor at my church. So I always like to tease him about that title, but very official. A paid position too. So
it's the bar. I don't donate my time.
Yeah,
so
that's good. And as you can tell with our last, we've been friends for a long time. So Eli has been first thing that came out, and this seems very accurate about you from your source, or my source for you, is that Eli has been prone to breaking bones. I didn't know the history of this, since you were 1.5 years old.
Oh, you went to my mom. You went way back.
Yeah. I said, the only thing I'd add to that is that besides a history of breaking bones for you, Eli, is that you also have a history of sending your friends the gory pictures of the immediate afterwards.
Usually with the broken bone comes some head trauma as well. So you're not thinking the most clearly when you are sending these pictures.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get into that story too. But it was the pictures he sent me after one of those accidents was pretty gory. Eli is, this is pretty funny. Eli is insecure about his moves or lack of on the dance floor. Although I would say you are a very powerful CrossFit athlete. My source on you said you can play any sport and that you dominate in doing puzzles, which I thought that was a weird one to throw in there.
That is... I think I'm there's puzzle making contests. Like you go and you race.
Speed
Never
puzzles.
done one. I feel like I'd be pretty good.
You feel I wouldn't have guessed that about you. That's not a judge on your character or anything, but
what's better than chaos coming into like a beautiful picture where things just fit perfectly?
I never thought about puzzles that way.
It's going to change your life.
Yeah.
Zen Dave is on his way.
I'm going to pick up a puzzle on the way home. And then in addition to the dance floor, this is something I added. So if you're insecure about your dance moves, one, you're probably the average white guy.
No, that would be a step up.
Okay, you're
worse. Giant step up.
Okay.
I have no skills.
Well, maybe to add to your insecurities then, because that's what friends do to each other, I would say something that didn't come up that I'm going to add is that if you are not insecure about staying upright on a road bike, you should be.
I've only fallen. I know this is like, you probably don't talk about this, but I've only fallen a few times, and like not at a top speed, not like going 20 miles an hour down a hill, hit a log. It's like dead stop, giving instructions, slowly tipping and falling, which is the greatest way to fall off a bike.
Okay. Well, I feel like I must have just been there for every time you've fallen then, because it seems like a lot. So through that description, Eli's also been, actually, you've technically ridden, well, we've ridden the same amount of mileage for the Fathers for Fatherless bike ride that we do, but you've ridden more years. And so you're the one who actually roped me into that, and we'll for sure get into that. The last thing that I would say before I give you a chance to introduce yourself is I always like to end on something very, very touching from a loved one. Your loved one said that he makes friends easier than anyone else. Helping others and being a dad comes naturally to him, and that his sense of humor keeps friends from taking things too seriously. And yeah, I would say check on all those. I know that we all have those friends that that we text or that we call or that we talk to when life's getting a little bit too seriously. I know that me tending to be a serious person at times, you've pulled me back a lot as a friend and got me laughing and got me remembering the good things and things I have to be thankful for in life too. So, welcome to the Stronghold.
Appreciated.
Yeah, Eli. Anything I missed there? That kind of ran the gamut.
That covers a lot. Yeah. Dad of 3, married. Oh shoot, 15 years. It'll be 15 years soon. Yeah, been here in a pastoral role since 2017, which was a big life change for us. And here we are. Yeah. I'm not a good dancer. That's not even established. Not even an average to below average dancer.
Yeah.
So
I had a heyday in the 90s in high school when the Running Man was big. So
good for you.
That was my move.
Good for you.
Unfortunately, that's gone the way of the old man that I am now. So with the Running Man gone, I just avoid the dance floor altogether. So that's something we have in common. Something else that we have in common, and we actually just finished up, is really, I think, when your source said that you make friends naturally, and that you kind of, I would say in another way, put people at ease. Being a pastor at our church, we've done this before. And so for those of you who don't know me or haven't heard me mention on the show, Eli and I both help lead our men's coffee group at our church. And if you look at the members in the group, we probably had 100+ guys, walk through the doors of men's coffee over the years.
Sure.
And it's something that really kind of grew in the midst of COVID and coming out of COVID, as I think a lot of guys, I always joke that they either realized that they needed fellowship and to be around other men, or their wives reminded them
that's probably more the latter.
Yeah.
Like,
and kicked them out of the house.
Get out of the house.
Yeah. And reminded them that they needed fellowship and to be around other men because they had been confined in a house together for years. So the good part of that is that it's really grown the men's ministry at our church. It's got a lot of guys into situations where they're getting fellowship. But as we grew that group, I remember distinctly, as we gather in the morning, we all grab our coffee. We kind of round everybody up. We'll talk about announcements, what's going on, things that are going on at the church, opportunities to serve in the community. And in one Tuesday morning, I think there's probably 20, 25 guys at the time. And we were all standing around. And here's Eli in a nutshell. I said, okay, guys, who here had Eli, or Eli was the first person they met when they came through the doors of the church, or first guy they got to know at Westbridge? And out of 20 to 25 guys, I would easily say over 3/4 for sure, if not almost every guy raised their hand. And I think that that's a testimony to, what your source said, makes friends easy, puts people at ease with your sense of humor, is very relatable. I know you taught me a lot about that, so I want to give you a credit right out of the gate. I might pick on you throughout this, and I'm sure it'll go both ways because that's the way our friendship works. But being relational, getting to know men, for me, to be quite honest, you might laugh, but just even remembering names in 2019 was pretty challenging for me, because I when you don't stress male relationships in your life, there's really no need to remember names.
Yeah,
you got a couple buddies.
Yeah, interesting. No, who is my source? Does that get revealed? Do they walk in at some point in this podcast?
Well, you guessed your mom, and I didn't say right, so.
So then it must be my wife.
I don't know. I said I wouldn't reveal it. So
no. No, I do think, yeah, that, I mean, not to sound, I don't know. I do think that is one of the things I've naturally been able to do. And so to find a spot or a occupation, I guess, where that makes people feel welcome, gets people connected. That's probably one of my favorite things to do. Is not that I'm learning I can't be friends with everybody, but the cool thing is when you get involved in a group like this or get involved at your church and people start to hear your story, it's easier then to connect people with each other. Like, you should talk to, you guys work at the same hospital. You're a nurse, you're a doctor. You guys should talk. And then they're like, oh, didn't know. So one of my favorite things to do is kind of connecting people together, because we're limited on how many people we can be intentional friends with, but to get them connected, it's great. It's one of my favorite things.
Well, you do a great job at it. And I think it sets the tone for a lot of how a lot of us men conduct ourselves and value relationships and fellowship. So I know it set the tone for our men's coffee group. And so thank you for that. One thing you mentioned when you introduced yourself, and I think this is interesting to people, because I would think that a lot of my friends, a lot of listeners, a lot of just people, when they think about church, think that you're born a pastor. Like you just come out of the womb, or your dad was a pastor. And so I think you took maybe the non-traditional route. And so you're kind of talked about what you're doing now. We've established that you're an associate pastor, but that even in the time that we've known each other, that wasn't necessarily the case, right?
Sure.
So maybe if we unpack that a little bit about what you were doing before that,
Sure.
how the opportunity came about, and like how do you even tackle that? Because I that's a lot to ask.
Well,
or a big change, right?
I think, a monster change. And I do think we were on a pretty traditional path where, young family. I think when we moved out here was 2016. We were living right outside of Minneapolis, small house. Ashley was working. My wife was working. I was working. Two small kids, started to outgrow the house, and we were like, let's get out of Hennepin County because of their taxes, which is great. So we got out. You didn't get out. You're still.
No, I'm in Wright County.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, conservative and lower taxes.
Wow.
So
You found the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So we started looking to get a bigger house, get out of the cities, kind of do on that path when you have young kids or you start to look at schools. So we found ourselves, I don't know, I would say miraculously here, because this was the one city, St. Michael, that I said I will never live in, because I was used to seeing everybody in Minnesota apparently owns a cabin. Not us. Not you and I are the only ones.
Yep.
And they sit on the highway at a dead stop on Friday every weekend. And I'm like, I do not want my life to be sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
So I will never live in St. Michael. And as it happens, then we slowly found ourselves gravitating towards this area. We found a house through a non-traditional way. That might be the theme of the morning. Everything was non-traditional. So
that might be the name of the episode. Thank you.
So we joined the St. Michael Albertville Facebook page. Somebody posted, there's a house for sale in the neighborhood. Got a hold of her. Turns out it was a contractor. So because of the good thing of social media, she introduced me to the contractor who was flipping our house, and we bought it pre-market at a time where houses were flying off the market. And so we knew friends who were going to Westbridge Church who invited us to come. And the first weekend we lived in St. Michael, we showed up here and reconnected with Jeremiah, knew him a lifetime ago from college days. And I think it was 3 or 4 months later, he called me on a Friday as I'm sitting in that traffic saying, got a question for you, left a voicemail. And I called Ashley and I go, you don't think Jeremiah wants to talk to me about a job here, do you? And we both laughed hysterically, because we're like, we are not work at a church kind of people.
Right.
And called him back and he was like, how would you feel about talking about a job here? And I was like, no. You don't want that. The list must be exhausted. If
who has he asked you this point? Who turned you down?
Bad options. You are the best bad option.
Yeah.
And so we actually spent, a significant amount of time trying to tell him no. And because we were comfortable, both of our parents gave us this solid advice. Said when moving to a new place, no major changes that first year.
Right.
And so we instead quit my job 6 months after living in St. Michael. Ashley got pregnant with our third, like a month after taking the job. I tore my Achilles 2 months after that.
Non-traditional.
Yeah. So definitely a non-traditional path, but the good that's come from it, I can just talk family wise of like being able to be more present with my kids. I mean, there'd be times where I'd be an hour plus from home doing a ton of different things at my old job. This has let me be a half mile from our house. There's a crisis. Like it happens when your kids are 12, 10, and 7. It's so nice to be close and be able to. So there was a sacrifice in it, but good has definitely come from it.
Yeah. So you're saying those rare crises,
those very moments. Rare, just every day crises.
Well, so, I'm glad I asked because I knew that I kind of knew the conditions, but I didn't know that like you kind of tried to resist that. And one thing that I would say that's funny, and maybe about Ashley, a question, so being involved with men's ministry and having that become an ever growing part of my life. I've had a few people say like, hey, when are you going to be speaking up on stage, or when are you going to become a pastor, or when are you going to make this official? And at different points, I've mentioned that to my wife, Michelle, and she's like, I am not going to be a pastor's wife. so on that note, it's funny how that's almost like a position, like the pastor's wife. I have a question after this, but what did your wife kind of feel about that? What was there? Because you kind of go from like just common folk coming through the doors.
We're still very common folk.
I know. I'm teasing you, but you take that status, and I think that people view you in a leadership role in the church, and then for Ashley, what was her feeling? Was she behind you all the way? Was there kind of hesitancy or discussions to be had?
Yeah, I feel like I was the last one to know that I was taking the job here.
Okay.
So, but we'll back up. I think there was this, like, we are not worthy. Like, I think we both grew up with the picture of what a pastor was, which I think we grew up in different churches in different states, but with a very similar idea of what a pastor was. And it was suit and tie and a lot of Greek words, a lot of deep theological Sundays. And so I think there was this like that we are not the picture of what the pastors we grew up with are. Right. So in that sense, we're not worthy of this, and we're just common folk. And I don't know. So there was this resistance to it. And it seems like when I told my old boss, I'm leaving, I'm taking a position here, he was like, I knew as soon as you told me about it. Because I had told him in a joking fashion, like, hey, the pastor at our church asked if I wanted to work for him. Ha ha ha. How hilarious is that? And when I told him, he's like, I knew. When I had talked to my parents about it, they were like, we knew you were gone. When Ashley and I finally came to that decision, she was like, yeah, like, why did this take you so long? But I do think there was this, it still is, this like you feel unworthy of the position and the title. But I think we all kind of deal with that, a little imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
We've talked about that.
No, absolutely. Talk about imposter syndrome and kind of feeling maybe not up to the role. And I guess that's maybe my other question, because I think a lot of men, a lot of people, just individuals feel that way, that, they're being presented with an opportunity, and individually they feel, not worthy, not up to it, not qualified. Certainly there's others. And then everybody that knows them, there's that saying that if enough people call you a horse, it's time to buy a saddle. And I think that typically the way it works with a lot of people. So the question I had was, and I don't know for sure. So just for reference, Jeremiah is our pastor at our church. And so when we say Jeremiah, that's who we're talking about. But so he saw that in you. But talk about qualifications a little bit. Did you go to seminary? Or because I know you were involved with our buddy through our international mission, Paul Herkman.
Yeah.
And I know that you've known each other for a long time. And Paul, certainly, for those of you who don't know Paul, I really hope to have him on the podcast someday. And now that I have video, it will be even better because Paul looks like Jesus, and he's
He's
in
definitely
the
a white Jesus.
yeah. Well,
The-
yeah. I mean, Jesus was. Wait, what are you saying? Jesus wasn't white?
I'm
Are we going to get
pretty
into that today?
positive. Yeah.
That he wasn't?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
According to most pictures in Sunday schools, they might say I'm wrong, but
well, this just got controversial. So, but no. So sorry to back up. Qualified. Like what was your background? Like where did becoming a pastor become a possibility? Just your charming personality?
yes, charm gets you so far.
Right.
Work on that. No, I went to, well, Jeremiah, our lead pastor, and I went to North Central University, which the year before I went was North Central Bible College.
Okay.
But they had just started a business administration program. And so I had no desire or inkling that I was heading down this path. So as business administration, you end up kind of with a minor in biblical studies,
Yeah.
no matter what course you take there. And so I knew Jeremiah from there, had no intention of pastoral studies, had some of those classes in it. So again, that was part of my thing too. Like, well, I'm not qualified. I didn't go to specifically be a pastor, take those. I never trained to be a public speaker, which that shows. But I do feel like when Jeremiah was talking to me about the job, it's like, it started off as managing our groups.
Okay.
And so it was like, you manage people in your old job. This is managing people. And I can see, I think, one of your gifts is connecting with people. So really it's that. And I guess I have a heart for caring for people. I much rather care for somebody than be cared for. And maybe that's I
think that's normal.
manly thing, or not
No.
a man thing.
Yeah.
But so it started with that. And then, so you're kind of in those relationships and getting to know people and being intentional with that stuff. And yeah, so I think it just wasn't something on our radar. So it wasn't something we were looking for. That's something you and I have talked about, is sometimes when you're not looking, that's when those opportunities appear.
Yeah.
So
there was some basis there besides your charm and personality. I mean, if you go through a college, you have the theology courses and basic religion. And, the reason I point that out is I think that our church fosters a great dynamic. One thing that we talk about is that the church extends beyond the four walls. That it's not just come on Sunday and your best version of yourself, best behavior, and you're a Christian then. It's really kind of the message, the fellowship kind of empowers you to be a Christian outside of the four walls of church. And I think what aids in that is exactly something you mentioned, that it's not about the title, about your knowledge of the Greek language, about what seminary and how you graduated in that class, and the dress and the attire. It was that you were ready to serve, and that people saw that in you, and that you stepped into the role. And I want to get back to imposter syndrome a little bit, but I think that that's really important because you see that, I think, throughout the people that attend Westbridge, the church that we go to, is a willingness to just step up and serve. Because it doesn't, when I think about our head pastor, I think about you, like our head pastor, I think he's really great at delivering a message every Sunday. And there's a ton of work that goes into that, the planning of a message, the public speaking, as you mentioned, getting comfortable with that, telling the story, portraying in a way, being engaging, being consistent, and the pressures that go with that. But I guess I don't think about our head pastor or you as unapproachable or kind of like above us. We all have our roles. And so I think that actually, when we talk about, the men's ministry at the church, it allowed me to see that there was a need. God was working in my heart. He said, work with men, further my kingdom, help them through the seasons of life that they might be going through. And here's an opportunity within the church that you attend. And then I always said, I've never like hit my head on the ceiling of Jeremiah or you saying, hey, whoa, Dave, back up. Like that's not your place, not your role. And I just think that that's the way that God calls us to be. We talked about a little bit this morning at Men's Coffee about personifying the Lord, or letting His light shine through us in our community, in our families, with our friends, in our workplace. And it's just really nice. I've had friends compliment me on that. And here's the compliment from friends that may not be Christians. You're not the typical Christian we deal with.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Sometimes you think like, am I being insulted or is this a compliment? And because Chandler, our youth pastor, and I, we work out at CrossFit. Clearly, you can tell. All right.
Yeah. We have video now to prove it.
We've had same thing. People come up to us, be like, "You guys are pastors," and I'm like, Chandler, are we being insulted here, or do we need to be better, or is this like a compliment? And I think we've come to the conclusion it's a compliment because, again, I think we all have an idea of what pastors or priests, what that looks like. And when you realize that we are normal people who struggle with normal things and that's our life, it does become more, I don't know, I guess approachable is a good word for it.
Yeah. Well, I just think that it's a good thing. I want you to hear that because I think that it helps kind of ease. It's even the the managers, like from a corporate America standpoint, the best managers I've had, are not necessarily the Ivy League educated, the ones who have gone through quote unquote leadership courses. Often the best leaders I've had are the people who maybe in their life they've had to navigate some difficult things as a father or a mother or a son or a daughter, and then they brought that empathy, that compassion into the workplace, and oddly enough, treat each other like human beings.
Yeah,
it's a weird approach, I know, but I think that's what makes our community around here work really well. And so, talking about imposter syndrome a little bit, is that something in your role that comes up frequently? Or more so when you kind of stepped into that role of associate pastor, or how do you see that, and how's that kind of act upon you right now in your life?
I think, it starts with, this has happened quite a few times for me in my life. If somebody calling out something in you that you didn't see, or it's a gift that isn't on your radar, or that you haven't developed very much. And so when someone calls that out in you, there is this period of like, no, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could be in that role. I don't think I could do that job. Or like my first week on staff, somebody was like, when are you speaking next? And I was like, absolutely never. Like, that is not my job. I do not want to. I never had to my entire life speak in front of, hundreds of people. And so that was terrifying. And then again, you think of what your idea of what a pastor is, and you're like, that's not me. And what would I even say anyway? And so I do think the longer you're in a position, a lot of this stuff is muscle memory, things you haven't used before that you start developing, and you start to get a little more comfortable. But I don't know if I'll ever get to like a point of like, I'm worthy of this position or title. And I think I was talking to a mentor about it, and they're like, I think, when you get to that point of like, I have deserved this, I've earned this, that might be the time to like step away. And so I don't know if that's like, keeps you humble, keeps you, knowing I think I've proven quite consistently I'm not better than anyone else. And there's not much, there's not like I don't know.
Well, I think you hit on something huge there. And they say it about politicians too, is, any person who wants to be the president is not the person that you want to be president. If they have kind of the feeling that they've earned it, or they're worthy of a title, with that much responsibility, oftentimes you kind of feel like the best candidates are the ones who say, I would never be interested in that position. And in the workplace too, I would say leadership is the same way. And that's a really interesting way to work through imposter syndrome. That it's almost like if you don't call it imposter syndrome, but you just call it, humility, or being in touch that you don't know everything. So as a leader, I think the way that presents itself is that you surround yourself with talented individuals. I think if you're a person who says, I've earned it, I'm certainly, worthy of this title and more, or, of course I'm the pastor, like who else would it be? I'm so great. And you lift yourself up, then anyone who kind of like brings you back down, you're resistant to have them around you. And so I think when you build successful teams in a corporate setting, even friends, like you can have somebody who's really full of themselves, but if they're competitive or full of themselves to the point that they want to be the smartest person in the room, or having achieved the most, and somebody comes into that setting and kind of makes them self-conscious about that or brings them down, you don't really have as a great of a friend group. It's like you should lift those people up. And so I think you do a great job doing that, but calling that out, that I think when you become comfortable with that title is probably the time you need to move on. It is really key.
No, and I think back of, thankfully there has been growth and progression in, my time here. But again, thinking of some of the things that events we've had here, or, funerals or Sundays where I speak, like that was something that was never on my radar. And what I'm realizing is through repetition, through reps, through preparing yourself, like anyone can take something that's a weakness, unless we're talking about dancing. I don't think with practice that will ever make me a good dancer, but you're capable of doing a lot more than what you might have think. And having friends around you to keep you humble, point out things where you're not so great, and being able to call that out. Right. I don't know if there's a lot of, I think what's going on here at church through our men's group is unique in a sense of like, I don't know if there's a ton of men who have people in their lives who are close enough to be able to call you out on the stupid things you do. And you're probably exhausted with having to call stuff out on me. Some of my favorites, there was one, Ashley is a night owl. My wife is a night owl. I can get up early in the moment, but towards the evening when the kids go to bed, like I'm crashing out. And that's when she is amping up. So she's ready. She's been, taking care of kids, taking care of the house, doing all those things. And so she's ready to connect with an adult. And I guess I am that adult.
Confirmed.
For the loose definition.
Hopefully. Yeah.
And so she's amping up and I'm winding down. And I talked to you. I remember being like, dude, she wants to talk at night and I am just done. And you were like, what was your workout today? And I was, something stupid because it's CrossFit, 1,000 burpees and something. She's like, and you go, you had enough energy to like do that workout, to suffer through that, but you don't have like 15 minutes for your wife at the end of the day. And I was like, oh, like, yep, I needed to hear that. So having people in your life who can see you as a husband, as a father, call you out when it needs to be like that, I think is unique and rare.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that story. And I mean, I can think of just as many where like I said, you've kind of brought me back down a couple of times too. And we do need that. And to your question, as far as how rare that is, if working with men gives me any indication, not only do they not have like those men who will hold them accountable and call them on their BS and their behaviors, and maybe just provide those redirects. Most men don't have the space to be vulnerable and get out of their own heads. So when we talk about things like imposter syndrome, or we talk about what we're capable of, a few of the things that you mentioned, it's one reason I started this podcast is helping not only people come on the podcast as guests and talk and have their story heard and kind of talk through things and have that as like a artifact of them at a point in time, which I think is so amazing. And it's fun to hear those stories. but for people to listen and for men to hear, oh, that's me, or yeah, I have that going on. I feel the same way, and to be relatable, because in person, it's extremely rare. I don't think guys have that, and you see it at things like I attended a retreat this summer of probably 20 plus men, and right below the surface is like this devastating story. Or we always talk about, with guys at Men's Coffee, when you get beyond like, hey, how are you doing? I'm fine, or I'm great. And then you ask like one probing question, and it's like, oh yeah, my wife's about to leave me. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's probably something we should talk about. And so I think it's something that you do really really well, is I think to be able to have that trust. And it's something that you've definitely started with the men's ministry at the church, is that you have to be relatable. Like, you have to be someone that I would want to entrust with that information, someone that I could feel like I can open up to. So another compliment for you. But one thing that we talked about, and we were talking about a little bit last night, and it's a constant theme with us, is not only being there for each other. But I read a quote, and so I brought it with that. When I saw it, I automatically thought of you, and I think that it goes both ways. And so the quote is, "Remember who stood by your side as you rebuilt yourself. Those are your people."
Yeah.
And I heard that on a podcast and wrote it down, and automatically I sent it to you.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit last night, from kind of two different perspectives. I had kind of a day, a Dave day, to kind of dwell on where I'm going from a mind perspective and a career perspective, and kind of some dissatisfaction about the timing of that and God's timing in my life. And then we got talking about, and we could probably backtrack into it, because not everybody in America has heard it, just everybody in the St. Michael vicinity. You sustained a very serious car accident 4 years ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago now.
Yeah.
So we can go into a little bit about that. But when we talk about those friends who were there while we rebuilt ourselves, we have literally and figuratively covered in this room.
Well, I think when we talked about vulnerability, that's people who know me probably wouldn't be surprised by this. It's not something that comes natural to me. And I do think this car accident, when you're forced to heal in front of people, there's no choice but to like be vulnerable. There's no way to hide a limp. There's no way to hide a wheelchair. There's no way. So I think that in one sense was easier, that it was a physical thing that I was, and there was no shame in it. Car accidents happen 1,000 times a day.
So maybe just to backtrack a little bit, because like I said, the entire St. Michael area where we live knows about this, but just so we're not describing a car accident, I think it matters. Like, so you want to take us back to that day and recount the highlights, just so, yeah. And this is where the gory picture came into play too. So
no, it was a Wednesday. I had dropped off the kids at school. My two, what were they? 5 and 6 at the time. I dropped them off. I had ran an errand for church, and I was on my way back, and I was probably less than a mile from the building, and I got to an intersection. There was no stop sign for me, but on the side road was a stop sign, and happened to be a truck there that didn't see me and pulled out, and so I braked and swerved, and the next thing I remember was being lifted onto a MRI table at a hospital that was a half hour away, and they saying, "This is gonna hurt." But the cool thing, in hindsight, you can look back and you can see how God worked and protected, which is, an interesting thing to say. I was protected when I was so broken in it. But one of the first people on the scene happened to be a buddy of mine who is a monster. His name's Phil. He's 6'6", CrossFit guy. He had gone and checked on the other vehicle. Someone was already talking to me. So he filled in all these blanks for me. But he comes walking up to me, and I had apparently gotten myself out of the truck. And I go, Phil, it's good to see you, man. I think I broke my femur. It really hurts. And Phil was like, oh, Eli's 4 minutes away from dying right now, because I don't know the percentage, but most times when you break your femur, you sever your artery.
Yeah.
And so you're about to bleed out. So he's like taking his belt off. He's about to tourniquet me. And he's like, wow, it's weird. Like, he's talking to me and he's not losing color. Like, maybe he's okay. And ambulance is on its way. And I remember he told me, he was telling me and Ashley, he was like, hey, if you ever doubt Eli loves you, which I think in marriage might happen more often than not. Like, I don't know. They might love me. They don't like me.
Right.
But as I'm laying in the road, I was like, Phil, we got to call Ashley. And so he gets my phone, and this was his first clue to me that I was not right. He hands me my iPhone, and I try to open it like it's a flip phone. And I'm like, and he's like, hey, why don't you just give me the code and I'll call Ashley, which again was a great thing. It's much better for my friend to calmly call my wife and say, you need to head to the hospital, than me laying broken in a road trying to tell my wife what's happening. So
yeah,
he get to the hospital. Ashley shows up. I think Phil had put her in almost too calm of a state where he was like, he broke his leg. Right. So he's going to be okay. And so I think she was like, she'd walk in and I'd be like, ooh, like
a bruise.
My shin kind of hurts a little bit. And instead I was severely concussed, and I was repeating 3 questions for like 4 or 5 hours. And it was, I don't know what happened. And a doctor or someone would say, you were in a car accident. And then again, because I had dropped the kids off at school, I thought they were in the car with me. And so I would ask, are the kids okay? And then I would be told I was alone. And so that brought me some comfort. And then I would ask how the other driver was and just repeat. So those 3 questions don't take long to get out.
Yeah.
And that was like 4 or 5 hours of repeat. And so I think when Ash walked in on that, she was like, oh, like this is more serious than I thought.
Yeah.
And so that was September of 2019. In my mind, someone in the hospital had told me you'll be walking in 6 weeks. And so in my mind, I was like, dude, I'm trick-or-treating with my kids. Like, this is a speed bump.
No, as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And then I'm sending buddies pictures of my leg filleted open and draining, all these things. And so I didn't know how serious it was. And I had no idea how long it would take to heal. Yeah. And not only heal, but then rebuild from that.
Well, yeah. And maybe just going through that, a couple of things that jump out, and I forget, and I laughed through most of that because we've cried and heard it, we've cried through it, and now we can laugh about it, or at least me. I take enjoyment in laughing at it. But the question where you didn't know if your kids were with you, and then what happened to the other driver, that I don't laugh so much about that. I mean, as a dad, that's pretty heart wrenching. One thing that you mentioned there too is the feeling that God was looking over you that day. There's a detail of it too, right? That you were driving the church truck.
Yep.
Because it's the one that we used to kind of, when we were a pop-up church, we had a big truck that pulled the trailer that kind of had all the contents of a church. And then we'd assemble it at a middle school, and voila. You think we're in a pop-up studio today. We had a pop-up church for a long time. But that was a big vehicle. I think if you're, well, you never know like how things work, but if you're in a Hyundai Sonata, let's say, is that what you drive?
It's a Kia Optima. How dare you say Honda?
Those are different vehicles.
They're probably made in the exact same plant.
Same, just different decals. But no, I mean, if you're in that, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, what's interesting, and I think, it's nice to be able to laugh and joke about it, but it was pretty, I think the reason why it hit me so hard was, so you know this, I lost my dad when I was, 3-4 months old. Never knew him. He never lived with us. My parents were separated at the moment. So I was born in January 21st, and he died April 23rd, I think. And he was 43 years old. And my sisters and I, so I was just born. I think my sisters were like 5 and 6 years old. And we, thankfully, my mom met somebody when I was 6, and they got married, and he adopted us. So all of my memories, I do have a father, but not my birth father. I didn't really know much about him. I knew what I did know wasn't great. He struggled with addiction, with alcohol. And so for me, it didn't affect me much until I had kids. And then I knew, like, as I'm watching my boy, who's a month old, who turns 12 tomorrow, if I didn't say that,
Yeah.
as I'm watching him grow up, and I'm realizing just by being present how much of a difference I'm making in his life, and how much I'm able to help Ashley, and how much I'm enjoying being a father. And then, in hindsight, looking back and being like, oh, like, I know, yes, I was thankful I had uncles and coaches and, guys from the church who were in my life, but there's nothing that can really replace that father.
Yeah.
And so I was like, one thing I know I want to do when I become a father is never, like, not be there for my kids.
Right.
And so when this accident happens, my kids are, all similar ages to me and my sisters as we were growing up. And I still, I was doing the right things. I'm working at a church. That's a get out of jail free card, right? You should be protected from everything if you work at a church.
Yep.
I was eating healthy. I was working out. I'm, doing all the right things to give me longevity. And in just a moment, it was almost all taken away. And so that really shook me, that even though me and my birth dad were on very different paths, not very different paths. There were still, he started a church. I don't know if we probably maybe haven't talked about that.
No.
He was doing a recovery program. So he was a big drinker, got saved, went hardcore, was helping lead recovery groups, all that stuff. And then towards the end of his life, started drinking again.
Okay.
And so that kind of set him down a spiral of bad choices, which led to their separation. And so I knew I didn't ever want to leave my kids. And so I think what shook me so bad was something so simple, so little that happens all the time, that was so out of my control, still almost ended up my kids in the same position I was growing up.
And you were how old when you got in the accident?
When what would I have been? 39. No. Yeah, 39.
Okay. So right around that time that you
So last year I turned 44, which was a giant landmark for me because it made me older than my birth father. And that was something that was on my radar for a while, of like, just got to get, past that. It was a big thing for me. And I remember no one cared. No one cared. I was like, this is such a big thing. Like, I did it. I am older than my birth father. And
well, I didn't like throw you a party, but we talked about it. But no, it's interesting. The things that we hang on to and the things that are momentous for us. I do remember having that conversation and then saying, I think immediately after, like, you got to put that in the rearview mirror, and that was kind of, as you kind of came through the rehab. So whoever told you that you'd be walking in 6 weeks, were you ever walking in 6 weeks? Because walking and being able to, like, support any weight, do anything physical or
I think
worth,
that's where I went wrong. I think what they said was true. Like, you should be able to walk in 6 weeks. And I was cleared to walk. I think it was 7 weeks, which they showed me the x-rays. I was like, you can still put your finger through the bone. Like, I should not be walking. But so when I was told that, I took that as like, I am back and normal and probably jogging. And instead it was like, you can walk, but it'll look like you took a shotgun blast to your leg. And so that was kind of a moment. Screws start breaking, and pain again. So I had no idea. It took, I think, over a year for the femur was broken in 3 places. And so it took over a year just for the bone to heal. And then you think about limping for a year, walking wrong, muscle atrophy, then having to rebuild. My PT said in 3 weeks of non-movement, you lose 50 or 60% of your muscle mass. And so I didn't use my leg for 2 months. And then after that, I used it so little that it was starting over.
Yeah.
It was starting over.
Yeah. And I think through that, I mean, so that's 2019. And I guess just framing it up, kind of bookending it, you were back in Eli's mentality, full strength in what year?
This year, maybe.
So about 5 years, 4 to 5 years
probably
of recovery.
It was probably a year of bone healing, a year of PT, a year of limping in the gym.
Yeah.
Last year, starting to feel okay. This 2024 strength. The cool thing is the doctor, who was, I really appreciated because she was like I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for you. And so in our first post-op meeting, I was like, do I ever get back to 100% from this? And she said, maybe 90. And at the time, when you're in a wheelchair, when you can't put any weight on your leg and it still hurts to sneeze because of all the ribs you broke. And you're like, 90 sounds pretty dang good. So for me, it's been cool to see in the gym numbers be higher than before.
Yeah. And definitely to shout you out a little bit. I mean, we have an accountability thread that we kind of share our wins and our triumphs. And when I start getting those, snapshots of the CrossFit workout of the day, and you're up there towards the top, and you got some monsters that work out at CrossFit. You're a terrible runner.
Terrible.
So I wouldn't even call it running.
No,
you give me your splits, and I'm like, I think I walk a mile in that time.
Oh, it's very true.
So to give you a little bit of like humble and praise, but strength wise, I mean, you literally move a ton of weight, and so when I started getting those, it was really cool as a friend because it kind of saw you coming out of that, gaining that confidence back, and I think that's key for guys to have. Is whether it's right or wrong, our capability and our strength is something that we attach that value to. And that took, as we just said, 4 to 5 years. And we talked yesterday, and where I'm going with this, there's a point. There's a term that actually is called knowing Greek words. I'm actually going to throw a Greek word at you.
Oh, this guy.
I got listening to, so I follow this guy on Instagram, and I can't figure out how I think it was divine that I ended up following this guy to learn this term. And he studies kind of like symbolism and religion across the world and different religions. And he had a Greek Orthodox, I don't even know what you call it, like a pastor or a priest, but Greek Orthodoxy. This guy's out in California, had a really cool like Greek accent, if that's a thing. And he was talking about a word in Greek. It's called epimony. So
do it in the accent now.
Epimony. Maybe that's my best Italian accent or Greek. It's probably the same thing. But what it means is persistence. And what it means when applied to the human is enduring oneself. And we were talking yesterday, and it's a great example. I was voicing frustration, and like I said, I kind of had a day about a year's kind of quest to better myself from a career standpoint or from a profession standpoint. And it's one of my goals of 2024. And the effort was there. We always tell our kids, just put in all the effort, do the work, and then you can't be disappointed with the result. Well, I must achieve most of my goals because I massively failed with this one. And I put in all the work that I could, and I'll qualify that, but put in all the work that I could. And guess what? I am disappointed with the result, and I am disappointed with myself. And then you kind of came in with, when my femur was broken, And it took me 4 years to recover my strength. And then I think we had that conversation. And so you brought me back down to earth. And then we got talking about our friend Andy, who I think always was seeking healing and just passed away recently. I think Andy always wanted to get back to healing, and that wasn't his course. The reason I point that out is I'm really focusing on that phrase of enduring oneself, because we tend to, I think, as human beings, as Christians, as men, as women, we compare ourselves to others, and we're talking about being vulnerable and opening up to others. We'll hold a lot of that stuff in because we'll think, oh, well, I had a bad day. I don't have cancer, or I have career issues. Well, I didn't break my femur. And we do this comparison game with each other. But the trick in life, the quest, if you want to say, we always think we're like the first generation to go through something, right? Like we're the first generation that has to endure ourselves and deal with struggle and deal with imposter syndrome. But that's an ancient Greek word to mean enduring oneself. And what I think it means to me is that I don't need to compare to you. What I endured is something that is mine to carry, and that I not only have, I have that task, but I have that responsibility to carry it well. And part of that's opening up to each other and learning how to share common experience and getting out of our own heads. And maybe my burden to carry or task is lighter than yours. And so then I think the responsibility goes up. It goes up above and beyond. Is that if I can recoup for something, then I can help my friend dealing with that cancer diagnosis, or help the friends around him, or build up that community, or help my friend, recovering from this catastrophic leg injury. But I just think it lightens the burden of it gets us out of our own heads, and it makes it okay to have problems and to talk to our friends about it.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Andy. You've mentioned about other podcasts, but won't do it justice overview was he got diagnosed with a rare appendix cancer in January of 2019. And he had life-saving surgeries that, along the way, he probably had 2 or 3 deathbeds before his final passing. And I remember after one of his surgeries, after his first surgery, they sold their house. They got a 5th wheel. They started traveling national parks. They really were focused on life experiences and seeing nature and God's beauty. And things started going wrong. He couldn't keep food down. He rushes back to the hospital. They open him up. They're like, cancer's back. There's nothing we can do for you. And around then, he invites me. It's in the middle of COVID, so everything's outdoors. He's like, hey, you want to come over and chat? And I'm in the middle of frustration because every step I take still hurts, even though it's almost been a year
Right.
of bone healing. And I'm walking up to him, and he's sitting out there with his wife, Rachel, and he's like, how you doing? And for me, I was like, dude, I'll be honest with you. Like, I will tell you how I'm doing, but just I know it doesn't compare to what you're going through. And he wisely said, just because you think I'm going through something harder than you are, doesn't mean what you're going through is not the hardest thing you're going through. And so just because we do all play that comparison game doesn't mean just because what you're going through is I view worse than me or mine is worse than yours, doesn't mean it's still not hard.
Yeah.
The hardest thing you've gone through is the hardest thing you've gone through.
Yeah.
And so, I think having that perspective, it still made it very hard for me to be like, my leggy hurts to my buddy. And, but still being able to recognize that this is the hardest thing you've been through, no matter what it is. And so you can have grace for yourself in that, and you don't have to compare.
Yeah. I just think it's the way that we have to live, because we have to be in community with each other. We have to be open with each other. We have to be vulnerable. And if we just if we just found the friend in our friend group that was going through the most trials and tribulations, then and just dumped on them with empathy and emotion and being there. I mean, that's an extreme example, but I don't think that really creates or fosters a situation of friendship. It's like a dependent, codependency.
Sure.
But yeah, I think enduring oneself, and so we talk about, we were talking about last night, kind of coming through, seeing kind of each other's rebuild. And I would say that mine happened a lot, really coming back into, serving others, getting out of, definitely serve my family. I've always been happy with the father that I've been, been happy with the husband that I've been. Definitely always can be better, and definitely not because I take it so close to heart. Am always striving to be better in those areas. But again, I didn't have a lot of need for like other male relationships, and most of them were like fantasy football drafts or fantasy football buddies, or guys I'd go out and have like craft beers with. And it's not that those can't create opportunities to have deeper friendships, but that's not what it was for me. But getting kind of getting out of my own head and serving others, I would say, I think that God reveals what he has for you in life, not what he wants from you. And I say that probably every other episode of this podcast, but it's just so true. I have friends that, aren't even Christians that will be dealing with very serious life issues. And I'll ask them like, how are you and your wife right now? What's she got going on? What does she need from you? What are you providing her? How are your kids doing? How's school going for them this year? Do you have any like charities that you serve? It's the best advice I can give you. Like if you're in your own head worrying about how bad you have things, go out and serve others. And while you're doing that, I challenge you to be thinking about what you have going on. Yeah. I've yet to run into an instance where I haven't felt, at least it hasn't taken my mind off what I have going on or swirling in my brain. So yeah, that's something that I know we definitely share a lot. And, but we were talking about last night, and I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts, is that you're the first guy that I've talked to talking about capability. You said, we're so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And so coming back from a catastrophic leg injury, again, when you texted me that picture of what that was, I had
put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, if you want to, yeah, we could. I'm sure there's like those sick orthopedic surgeons out there that love the breaks on like the NFL games that would love to see that injury. Cause it doesn't, my words on gory doesn't do it justice. I had to try to figure out if it was or what you're showing me. I figured out it was a leg finally. But you came back from that, and that was a physical, something that a huge challenge physically, 4+ years. I'm sure a lot of impatience, a lot of setbacks, a lot of, I am back, and then getting brought, hammered back down to earth of, okay, I'm not back, and there's more physical recovery to go here. But you really conquered something difficult physically, and that's my ballpark. I like that. I don't know, something about, I think living a life of maybe like my mid-20s through my 30s of being kind of a sedentary dad and being more words than actions, I've really gotten into pushing myself physically. And then by doing that, I came to a point just recently where I said, okay, if there's a mind, body, and soul connection, and I believe there is, we always kind of like refer to it on this podcast and with other friends like as a 3-legged stool.
Yep.
So if you improve your mind, then I mean, your body your body raises up, your soul raises up, your spirit raises up. And I think that through doing difficult things with your body, that can be taking on difficult challenges or being presented with one, that you start to see, oh, there's certainly a connection here. Because if it's just my body, I would have given up. But something in my soul stirred me to say, keep going. Something in my mind told my body, you're not done. You have to heal. There's more to endure. And not only are you going to endure it, you can endure it. And so you realize that intricate connection. But you mentioned something last night about maybe taking that beyond, this next year, as we're looking towards 2025, kind of building upon that, what you've done physically, like kind of into the mental and spiritual.
Yeah. Well, I think, and we've had conversations about this of like, in hindsight now, looking at what the last 5 years have been, I've been like, man, I wish I would have, if we look at things physical, spiritual, relational, I was out of balance in physical because I had to be. For me, being able to walk, being able to, bend down and pick up one of my kids when they fall, or being able to get to them if they're hurt. That was such a big part for me of fatherhood. So being able to be a healthy dad and a strong dad helped me be a good dad. And I think some of my identity was found in that. So when I was in a hospital bed, when I was in our bed at home, when I couldn't move in bed without Ashley working my foot for me, it was so hard for me to not be depressed or sad about not being able to be there for my kids in the way I wanted to be. And so most of my attention for that 5 years went to physical therapy, went to, showing up to the gym. Now I'm exhausted because I worked my leg that has shrunk immeasurably over the last few years. And so now I'm tired from that. And so a lot of my time and attention went to physical recovery. And I was talking to you about that of like, man, I wish I would have, there's relationships I should have spent more time in. There's spiritual disciplines I should have been better at. And you thankfully were like, there's going to be seasons where you're out of balance, and you have to give yourself grace in those seasons because, I think when something's so drastically wrong in one of those areas, and for me, it was physical. And again, I think the physical part sometimes can be the easiest part to be disciplined in coming back from, because there's not shame, and it's not an addiction. It's not something where you're not proud to say you're working on being a better person for this. And I think I think I'm finally in a place where I can pursue balance in those three areas, because I finally feel good physically. That means I have more margin now. I don't have to go to the PT 5 hours a week. There's things I can do now where hopefully I think 2025 is like the year of balance.
Yes.
Which is scary for me to think that I can, things are going good enough where I can finally focus on everything.
Yeah. No, and thanks for reminding me. That is what we were talking about last night. As far as balance, and you point out something there, the seasons of life. So I'm in this group. Primarily, people are located out of Washington State, and we'll just say like mental discipline or mental toughness. And so it's a group of people who are really looking to self-assess and to harden their minds and develop more discipline with their lives. And it's a great group of human beings. What there's a lack of sometimes is that word that you used, grace. And here's what we just had. We're just on a podcast the other day, and my friend Lou is out in New Jersey. And Lou's young, he's about to get married, he's talking about having kids. And so it's just the kind of guy I love being around, because you kind of get to see that time in life through another man's eyes. Sure. And that excitement for him. And Lou's a phenomenal guy. And he just took a bigger role on at work. And he just said, like, for 2024, he's going to work 900 hours of overtime.
Jeez.
So I think a full-time job we had established was like 2,000 hours. So he's almost worked another half a job at the same job. So tons of overtime. And he's like, the money's nice, but what I hear from Lou a lot of the times is, I'm not getting to jujitsu. I'm not getting to the gym. I'm not, keeping up on my diet the way I wanted to. And I had to say, like, time out. Like, we do challenges such as 75 hard or, discipline equals freedom resets, or gym challenges or CrossFit, to manufacture challenge, to manufacture struggle in life. You're struggling with life. don't discredit yourself that
Yeah.
like your season of life now is to deal with that time at work and to balance, like you said, the relationship with your fiance, your health as you look to have children, this marriage, this wedding that you're planning for June. That's your season of life right now. That's what you're taking on. It isn't that, and then mount on top of that manufacturing difficulty or discomfort. Like know why. Let's all just get out on the table why we try to manufacture discomfort. It's so that when challenges of life or seasons of life present themselves, we're like, oh, I've seen something like that before, and I know in my mind I can deal.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's resilience, I think, is something some people are born with, but most people probably have to develop.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I am trying to establish in my kids of like, hey, like life is not just this slow climb up of everything just keeps getting better and better. And then you die and then it gets even better.
Yep.
And so I'm like, there's going to be these big things. And we were talking about it last night. Like, I'm hoping they've seen some resilience and they realize like, hey, like terrible things happen. Look at all the good. One of the frequent things I say is like, yeah, bad things happen. My boy's doing a deep dive into 9/11 right now. And it's like, I don't know if you've heard the story of the man in the red bandana.
It doesn't end well. I'm guessing.
No. Well, it ends well in the sense that there's a guy and he was in the World Trade Center when this happened and he could have got himself out.
Okay.
He found the stairway, was able to get to firemen, was then turning around, going back to floors that are on fire. And he would say, if anybody can hear me, like stand up. If you can hear my voice, follow me. If you can help somebody, help somebody. But I know where the exit is. And he was leading people out. And so he happened to be in the tower when it collapsed and no one knew what happened to him. And newspaper articles start coming out where they're like, all these survivors who are like, I thought I was going to die. And all of a sudden this man with a red bandana showed up. And so I frequently tell my kids, like, yeah, there's bad things will happen, but there's always going to be somebody helping.
Yeah.
And so that's just one of the stories of like, yeah, bad things happen. There'll always be good people. So look for the helpers.
Yeah. That resilience. So I say it a lot. You do the thing, you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And I know this the message that we had this last Sunday at church, something came up in it that I think is very important. Again, Christian or non-Christian, it's important to realize. I think a lot of people might look at not only people that will look at Christians and think this way, but people who are Christians think this way, is that you find God and then life's all like cake after that. That you discover the good news and think good things will happen to you. And the message was that you discover the good news and you start reflecting the light of the Lord and good things will happen through you. It isn't, if it was only as easy as to find God, accept him into your heart, and life was like you said, kind of an upward trajectory of greatness and good. And then you get to heaven and it's even better. I think acknowledgement is a part of resilience because it kind of sets that expectation. I know that there's in the book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I read it and I thought it was more like a philosophy book or a psychology book, because everybody had read it and it sold millions and millions of copies. And I read it, and I don't like Holocaust books. Like it's a terrible point in history, and I'm not.
I think that would be a weird thing to say, though.
Right?
Like I love this.
Like I love Holocaust history. That would be odd. So maybe I'm normal and I don't like that, and I'll avoid reading the books. But I got reading the book, and it's about the Holocaust. And I'm like, oh no. But it's a good book. And the point there is that he talks about the biggest destructive factor in anybody who had given up in in these concentration camps is hope.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing that they could be given, was hope for rescue, and then for it not to come. And then he saw that there'd be rumors that like the Allies were coming close to their camp and that they'd be rescued within the week. And then the week would come and they wouldn't be rescued. And he's like, that's when people killed themselves.
Yeah.
That's when people lost all hope. That's when they were just deflated. But what drove him in kind of the man search for meaning, not spoiler alert, it's been out like for decades, is what he had to do that day, like what he kept in front of him, who he could serve, a point that he could provide, something that people would look forward to within the men that he was in the concentration camp with. And if he could provide that, and he could focus on that, and he could complete that task, that kept him going.
Yeah.
He wasn't one of the ones that lost hope. And I think that is, when you talk about doing the right thing and setting the right expectation with our kids, is, again, it might be as simple as going back to finding a way to serve others and taking your focus off yourself. And I know we talked a little bit last night kind of about, one of our kids like going through a sports experience that was a new and challenging experience, and feeling out of place and not wanting to go. And I think that a way to encourage to that situation might even be, as we're talking, like, if you're feeling that way, probably pretty good likelihood some other kids feeling that way, feeling that maybe they're behind the others, or just it's an uncomfortable experience, or they're not making friends like they'd like to. I always, that's one thing I with my boys with swimming. Swimming can be it's a team sport, but it's very individualistic. So you can kind of get in competition against each other to swim a specific event, or be kind of like the A swimmer, B swimmer, C swimmer, and get one of those varsity slots.
Yeah.
And there'd be the kids that would be like very cutthroat, and it would make other kids feel bad. And I got more than once from other parents, like, my son goes to practice. My son's joining the swim team this year because of your boys, because they offer encouragement for him. They know when Carter or Trevor are at the swim practice, it's going to be okay. Like, they'll have somebody to talk to. They'll joke with them. They feel like they belong on the team. And I think that, it didn't make the competition any easier for my boys. It didn't make the events easier to win. It didn't give them status on varsity. They had to, of course, work for that, but it made them better human beings. And it taught them resilience, and it taught them, because we got into a conference it's the elite schools for swimming in the state of Minnesota. And so we weren't winning, but we won, and they won because they're excellent teammates, and they are great young men. And there was those teammates who were there because of them, and because they fostered an environment of, okay, we're not winning, and maybe we don't fit in here, but together we can have the right perspective. We can be resilient. We can help each other. We can serve others. And I just think that that's something that I wouldn't know, if I wasn't involved in a setting where I could be vulnerable with guys, where I could talk about life, talk about being a husband, talk about being a father, talk about being, a man in the workplace.
I think that's what's, again, kind of the vulnerability thing of, like, when you get beyond the surface, when you share, what stage of fatherhood, what stage in your marriage you are, there's always people ahead of you. There's people who haven't gotten that far yet. And so you have advice for, I would have advice for the new dads. You have the perspective now. You've gone all the way through it. Now your kids are, out of their house or in college, going through that. And so you're able to give perspective to me, who I'm 6 years away from sending Benj off, and so I think none of that comes out, though, if you can't get beyond the surface level stuff of friendship, of conversation. And I think, a lot of my examples of the last year all have to do with physical healing, but I think there are a lot of maybe the template for that can be applicable to, spiritual healing, to relational health. And all the common thread, I think, through all of that is this vulnerability, but also having accountability through it all. And so I know, like, I've already gotten a few texts here because I did not go work out at 8 a.m. I have to go to 12:30 for where it's like, where are you? So I have that community that's like, hey, you're usually here. Where are you?
Right.
And that's been the same with men's coffee, with having people there. And
CrossFit. I mean, community, you said. I mean, some might say cult, but
I don't know anyone who would say that. Are you having fun working out in your basement alone, cold, hearing your dog walk around?
Yeah, Eli always teases me. He calls me the lone wolf. Well, I'll tell you what, it's nice. Like, I can just be in my pajamas and walk right downstairs. And
you get CrossFit will let you work out in pajamas. It's fine.
I'm sure there's pajama days at CrossFit.
We're going to start them.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You can have that one. So, talking about relating what you've endured physically and looking ahead into 2025, I always talk about being intentional. Like, do you kind of have ideas of how you're going to put that into practice, to develop that into? So there's 3 legs. So we got the physical good. Like, in this room, I think physical covered. Like, got some subject matter experts.
Yep.
Right. Whether manufactured or whether
this
just
is the peak of
provide it.
In your 40s fitness.
Yes.
You're looking at it right now.
Yes. This is it, ladies. So, so mind and soul, like, where are you going with that? And how do you hope to kind of build that up in 2025?
I think, so for spiritual, I think starting the day in either devotion or being intentional with reading the Bible. I haven't read through the Bible in some years now. So
what? You're a pastor.
Yeah, I've memorized it, of course.
So you just haven't referenced back to
just
sharpen up
to what I need.
Okay.
Ask me a scripture. Don't do it.
Zechariah, is that a book? I always text you. I didn't even know that was a book. Habakkuk. Habakkuk. Come on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So being able to be intentional with that, with relational, like I said, Ashley, we have this brief window post dinner, pre-kid bedtime, pre-kid homework, where we could sit down, and I know it would mean a lot to her. And so this knowing I'm capable of more than what I thought, and I think the physical stuff we've done, the bike ride, the 100-mile bike ride, like, we are far more capable than we can be pushed farther than we think we can. And so carving out intentional time, I think there has to be some kind of limit on social media scrolling. I think that's my go-to. You sit down and you're like, all right, the kids are doing their homework. I have a moment to myself for the first time today. I will just zone out. And I think that, all of our phones, well, I don't know. You're an Android guy, correct? I don't know if you guys have this capability on your phones.
Anti-Apple. Yeah.
But it tells you how many hours a day you're on social or on stupid games.
It does the same.
That's great that you guys have caught up to Apple. Your phone can work for you. That's great.
Yeah. And I don't have to replace it every 6 months. So it just works great.
So yeah, I think being more intentional with where my time goes in that. And then, I don't know. I'm trying I don't know what the next physical challenge is. I know we're doing the bike ride again. This just in. Yeah. But I don't know. Just telling my time where to go. And I think we all could be better at that because there's so much more time. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. Yeah. And how do we spend it?
Yeah, that's, one thing I really came into touch with that. I joked a little bit when we were talking this morning about our local football team played last night on Monday Night Football.
Don't say our.
Or
I'm a
the
Detroit
local
Lion.
Okay, so another thing I guess we should know about Eli is that he's a Detroit sports fan, but not. You're not really a Red Wings fan, right?
I wish I was a hockey fan.
Okay,
that's one of the few things I could be proud of.
Yeah, the one thing to be proud of, like through any Michigan sports. Well, Michigan. Okay, and you don't even get it right with your college team. You like the Michigan State Spartans.
Go Spartans.
That's a college, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in Michigan, the Wolverines are the actual good school. So Eli's, I guess all I want to establish is Eli is sports confused.
No, I have loyalty, which is something you Minnesotans don't know much about.
No,
There's a lot of bandwagon fans out here.
Yeah, no, that's where I was going though. No loyalty to let's call it the local football team, because I could care less. I didn't even know they played last night. So that's called recovery, folks, because I think in 2019 I lived and died. Like I determined, am I going to church today? Like I don't know. Does it come really close to noon kickoff? And my week was certainly revolving around the NFL for most of the year, and so did not even know that I'm recovered. But with that point being, that's, I always ask guys like, spending time with your wife, the time when you got with your kids, it's one of the first questions I ask. Like, do you watch sports? Like, how much time you spending on your phone? And the truth is, we do have a considerable amount of time, throughout the day. Now that can get filled, and in seasons of life, that time can be taken from us. But if you kind of round it out, we always have enough time. And I guess one thing I'm going to do myself in 2025 that I'll pass along is, avoid the doom scrolling. Because I like it sometimes. Instagram memes are funny, and we have. I'm not going to say anything more than we have a Instagram.
If I ever lose my job here, it's because the Instagram,
because that's been revealed.
Came out.
Yeah. So that's a thing. It's our friend Caleb, though. It's his fault if he's listening. Caleb, you're a terrible influence.
Yeah.
You need to get to church. But with that, I'm replacing the doom scrolling. They call it micro learning.
Oh.
And so, I just did a podcast and I said, one of the biggest advice to people is do not get off social media. Do not get off social media. Because everybody's like, well, I'm going to give up social media. And like, there's never been a time in our life where knowledge is at our fingertips more than right now.
Yeah.
And so the idea with micro learning is, to be intentional. Like if you don't know, I was laughing at my friend from Canada the other day. I'm so clueless about Canadian politics, and I had heard that the prime minister is up for election in 2025, and I think a lot of people in Canada would be relieved. And so I'm like, I'm going to check that out. Like, when's the election? And I look it up, and it's like sometime in 2025, Canada will have an election for prime minister. So I had to ask him, like, how does your thing work here? And so micro learning, I looked it up, and I was actually more confused than when I started. But
I love that you were like, I want to be a better husband, father, and also learn everything about Canadian politics.
Yeah, that's the way my mind works.
3 legs of the stool.
Yeah, it's it's an inquisitive nature. That's what I'm blessed with. No, it's but yeah. So micro learning is one thing I would definitely throw out to anybody. Replace the doom scroll. There's apps you can pay for and stuff too. Like you read pretty much the cliff notes of a bunch of books, or the 15-minute read version of books, and then you can say, oh, I read that book. And you can pay for that, or you can just go and search it out. Or if there's a deficiency you have, or if you're going to listen to a podcast, be really intentional with the content.
Yeah.
And because you can learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
No, I like that.
Yeah. Hopefully, we've talked about it before. When I start to get a little nervous when everything starts to go good, or feels like life is calm for the moment, because it's not without merit, because I feel like the last few times that I've almost achieved this balance in physical, spiritual, and relational, the hammer is dropped in some area of my life. And so for me to be optimistic about 2025 still has a little bit of like looking over my shoulder, of being very cautious at every intersection I'm at, just that hangover of what has happened. But I'm hoping this is there's been years of rebuilding, of healing, and now this I feel like is hopefully a year of like growth.
Yeah, and you told me that last night. I told you to shut up and quit thinking like that. As a good friend would say, because words have energy and thoughts have energy. I mean, maybe that's I don't know that we solve it here, but maybe our friend John, that's a psychologist. Maybe you need to work with him on that. Work through that issue. But yeah, I mean, you did talk about that a little bit. I think that's something a lot of people deal with is when you've gone through a lot of struggle and you feel like, okay, I've climbed out of that and I've surmounted that challenge. And then you're right back in the hole. And so that becomes your expectation. And I don't know what I said to you last night, but I guess what I'd say is I think that's a very human emotion. And in that, I know what I said to you. I said that, again, relating everything back to running as I typically do. I said that, when I've been running, especially the last few years, I've gone through micro instances of your leg injury or injuries. Cause now hearing that like your injuries go back to 1.5 years old, I'm questioning the tap water in Michigan that you were raised on.
We weren't in Flint, but
yeah. It's all in Michigan though, right? So
yeah,
I think I've identified the problem with your brittle bones. But with that, I shared that it's amazing. Do I want to run without injury and achieve great things and increase my split times? Yeah, certainly. Like if that was what was given to me, I'm not going to complain about a life of achievement and comfort and no trials. But leading up to last year, so 2023, I was supposed to run a marathon and I did everything wrong. I was my first running friend. Like I didn't have a friend that I could rely on. The only guy that
internet existed with plans of how to train for this.
Talk about micro learning. I should have looked up like how to run and not hurt yourself catastrophically. But yeah, the running friend I had, he weighs like 60 pounds less than I do. So it's not, he's just like, well, just run a lot. I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that at 210 pounds. I should just run more. That will help my injuries. But with that, that led up to, in 2023, the Minneapolis Marathon. And if I would have had to run that day, I ended up running it. I split it up 13 miles. I think it was that Saturday and then 13 miles the next Sunday in excruciating pain.
Yeah.
I had IT bands. I found out that my body had IT bands in it and it's like some type of special rubber band or something. And then I had a really bad ACL injury that was a borderline tear. And I couldn't get out of my head that I needed to do that. I needed to run that marathon and complete that task. And so that led into 2024, almost same time frame, a year later. Spent the entire winter rehabbing and trying to get stronger. And then I tried to run and then like, oh, I'm not stronger. I still have that pain there. And then finally getting to a point of acceptance where it's like, okay, this is not going to be the time that it would have been last year, like as far as the marathon overall time and the splits that I was holding pre-injury, but I can still complete this and it can still look pretty good and I can still do it. And I tell you, crossing that finish line this year, it was awash with all of that achievement. Not that life was comfortable, not that those splits were given to me. It's that I earned every single step of that race. I had to keep my mind, like during that marathon, I had to keep my mind in the moment of I didn't have to, I did every pace, not just the mile time, but like literally every step to say, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. You can do this. You've trained. And it was because life provided that injury that had to be overcome that it made it a million times more rewarding. And it's not, again, not that I welcome injury, but I learned that I could endure that. And I think that you learn that with your recovery from your car accident and your leg injury. And it's something that you should remember in that. Is it okay to wish that this is going to be a year of balance? Yeah. I wish that for you too. As a friend, I want to see balance and I want to see, I don't want to see brittle bone Eli making an appearance. And I think that's entirely possible. But at the same time, I shared with you, it's like, it just, if that happens, I know that I'm capable of, okay, this happened. I have to come up with a plan. I have to recover. I can recover, I can achieve. And I think that that's, as we talked about, whether it be Christianity, whether it be going through injury, so spiritual, physical, the mental side of breaking through something at work or just something you're dealing with mentally, like success is not guaranteed, and success in the moment doesn't always look like success. And I said I'd double back because I used some words I didn't mean to. With a career search this last year, I said it was a failure. And a failure would indicate that it's over. That search is the search to better myself professionally is over, and it's certainly not. It's like, okay, I put this down. I did not achieve what I hoped to achieve. It wasn't the timing that the Lord would have for it. But I also shared through that experience, he's taught me a lot of where I need to be and what my value truly is, and not just accepting the first thing that comes along or the first promotion at work that comes along, but really looking for where he'd have me and where I can be the best version of myself. And so I would challenge you this year, and we'll hold each other accountable, I'm sure, but to not focus on the easiest outlet, but to challenge yourself and to be okay with failure in the moment. To know that it's not failure until you quit trying.
Yeah. What I should have said a little earlier, because again, I think when you're in the middle of a crisis, no matter what it is, physical, spiritual, relational, the rush and the tendency is to get back to what it was before this happened. And I think, and that's where I was too. I was like, man, if I can just get back to walking with my kids when they trick or treat, what a life that will be. And I think now that I'm through that, I've had this, I had heard it, so I'm stealing it. I had heard this guy say he was going through a mental health crisis, and he was like, I just want to get back to being the guy I was.
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong perspective in hindsight, because you should never look to get back to, no matter how good it looks, to just where you were. You should always try to look to get back to a point where you're better. You should always be growing and striving to be better. But again, and I fell into it. It was like, I just want to get back to functioning.
Yeah.
What a great life that would be. And I think, but we also talked about Andy when that came up. Like he didn't have the opportunity at the end to get back to what he was physically. And that would have been amazing for him, just to get back to functioning. And so not everybody has that ability or has that opportunity to get better from what they're going through. But I think if your goal is not just to get back to where you were, but to grow and be better from it, I think that's where I went wrong in the last 5 years, because I was in such a rush just to get back to where I was, that I rushed through a bunch of different things where I could have gotten better.
Yeah. No, I think that's setting expectation, and not only that, but you mentioned Andy, and so our buddy Andy, he started a mission called Legacy to Inspire. And yeah, you're right. I do talk about it frequently, on the podcast and on other podcasts I've been. And the reason I talk about it is because there had to be an acceptance at some point, when you have an all organ transplant, and you're making scientific history, a realization that there is not normal to get back to. There's probably not old Andy to get back to. That he came to that realization, and what does he do? He starts a mission, Legacy to Inspire, and there's two very appropriate words in there. Legacy, because he left it. It now lives on beyond him, and Inspire, because it's inspired me. It's inspired me to have a servant's heart. We talked about that a lot. Jenny Becker's episode, Servant's Heart. If you haven't listened to that,
Avid fan.
Oh, yeah.
5 stars.
Yeah,
until this episode, I'm going to give you like a 3.
Well, you brought me coffee, but Jenny brought like really just powerful content.
Yeah.
So that, check that one out if you haven't. But we got talking about a servant's heart, and so where that came into even concept for me was through Andy.
Yeah.
And I had served with Andy. We joked, uh, pre kind of all that going on for him. He was kind of a gruff dude. He's an engineer,
Sure.
like typical engineer. I think most people can relate to that. Pretty serious, had his way of doing things, and most of the time his way was the right way to do things. And I think I just annoyed him most of the time. But then seeing him kind of progress and to inspire is what we're talking about. Is the expectation that I'm going to get back to who I was? Well, would you even in that scenario, like a friend who has mental health issues, I want to get back to where I was. Do you even want to get back to where you were if that got you to have mental health issues? Or do you want the tools to go through recovery and to get better, and then to have the building blocks to become an even better version of yourself?
Well, maybe I should, go a little deeper into that, because yes, Andy, he did get back physically in the middle of it. He did the bike ride with us, after the 7 organ transplant, and he made American medical history. But as he knew cancer was back, and as his body was getting taken over by that again, yes, the hope of, outside of a miracle, of physically recovering was getting less and less. But I would say, maybe I could argue that he was better than what he was, because he had this clarity of what is important and who is important. And what do I want my legacy? He was focused solely on legacy. And I think all of us should have that perspective, right? Like, because none of us know. And this was a joke between me and Andy, because when I saw him after his first surgery, I was like, dude, you can do this again. You'll do this as many times as you have to. You'll do it so your wife doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And, I told him, like, nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. Like, you could get in a car accident at any point and your life could be taken.
Yeah.
And then within the year, he was in my hospital room saying, do you remember when you said no one's guaranteed tomorrow? Because it could all be gone and out of our control. And so for him to be solely focused on legacy, I mean, I had the honor of officiating his funeral. It did not feel like an honor in the moment, because I would rather have been anywhere else doing anything else if I could have, if that meant he was here with us. But he didn't want his wife to have to worry about doing anything at the funeral. He planned his entire funeral. Everything that was in it was planned by him, and it all led to what was most important to him, which was inviting people to have a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. And I remember that day too. I think you pointed out the different groups of people that were in that audience for his funeral too. It was all walks of life. It was work, family, friends from old churches. It really, you had everybody kind of raise their hand in the number of groups and the impact
just
that he had.
To correct you, that was his wife, who he said would definitely not want to speak at his funeral. Got up and thanked everyone in the room.
Oh, that's right.
For loving him in ways she could not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's, with these conversations, Eli, it definitely, I always say, these good conversations, let's put a pause on this and definitely come back to this and talk about how life's going at different moments. And thank you so much for the time today. I think that's probably an important message to hear, to kind of maybe bookend, this podcast, is when you're recovering from something, the standard that you set for yourself of what recovery looks like, with your leg injury, you didn't know what that looked like, but you knew you needed to recover, and you did. And I think that you've become a more resilient individual because of that, because the carrot kept getting moved, what the recovery looked like, and thinking you were back, and then again, hammered back down to earth, and nope, you're not back. And then realizing where you're at now and being stronger in a lot of areas, but still having challenges with that. I know personally, last year was 7.5 minute miles, and I ran 8.5 minute miles this year. And there was a point during training where I realized it's not going to get back there, Dave. And I had to just give thanks of like, well, it's going to get somewhere. And then my friend, and I think this is a good way to maybe wrap this, what you have the opportunity to do through your trials is to be a reflection of God's light in the world. And my friend, I was sitting in the hotel room, night before running my first marathon, and nerves and whether I'm going to even be able to sleep or not was on the table. And my buddy Russ texted me and he said, go out there, Dave, and be the beacon of light tomorrow. And that just took all the pressure off. It wasn't about my split times. It wasn't about where training had gotten to. It wasn't how my knee was going to feel. I had a chance to be a beacon for the Lord that I serve. And that was the whole point anyway.
Yeah.
And, went out there that day and I remembered that, and I slept good that night because of that message. And we got to the last 2 miles of the race, and I had just gotten done bombing down a 300-foot descent for about 2 miles because I thought, hey, I'm a big guy. I'm going to use momentum. Well, just for talked about being a running friend. So as a running friend, for any of you newcomers to that scenario, one of the biggest challenges about running is actually running downhill. It pounds your thighs tremendously and your knees, and it can just really wipe you out. And so I hit my empty at 24 miles, still having 2.2 miles left. And I was hurting. I was literally having to, if I stopped for water, having to swing my arms so that my knees would follow and get back into something resembling a run.
You're not selling me on this marathon.
I'm not trying to sell anybody on a marathon.
Good.
That's got to be your decision, whoever you are out there. But we got to the end, and there was a guy hurting more than I was. So when I swung my arms and got my legs resembling something doing a run, he was walking, and he was a fit dude. And I said, hey, you know what? Just pace off me. I ran past him, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes here, ran past him. And I just said, hey, dude, just follow me, pace off me. And he did that to the next water station. So whatever that was, like 3/4 of a mile to the next water station, 3/4 of a mile to the finish line. And I didn't know him. I didn't see him the entire race until the last 2 miles. And we just gave each other a huge hug at the end of the race. And he's like, thank you so much. Like I got my time I was going for. And it's a lesson. Was my time glorious? Was it the time I wanted? Me, I. No, I mean, it honestly wasn't. But I had a phenomenal day. And I think that I served the Lord in that space by being a beacon of light. And thanks, Russ, for sending that quote. It kind of framed up that race really well and gave me a good night's sleep. And I think it frames up this podcast really well. But
what I love about that is that goes back to the lesson I'm working on with my kids, which is when you're struggling, when something bad happens, like look for the helpers. And I think whoever random guy who is struggling with a couple miles to go, he had probably no hope that someone would show up and say, let's do this together. Yeah. But I think that's part of what we're called to do is be looking for the person who's struggling, or sometimes it'll be you and you need to be looking for the helper.
Yep.
But yeah, I love that. That's what you've been really good at doing here at Men's Coffee, giving people that space to be able to help or to ask for help or just to share where they're at, and the helpers show.
Cool. Well, thanks, brother. Hey, I guess just to wrap it up, anything else that you want to get out there? Anything that we didn't want to, or?
No, I think we covered a lot. I think, hardest thing you're going through is the hardest thing you're going through. And so being able to share that can show other people the path of healing. So yeah, it's not my favorite thing to do, heal in front of others or be vulnerable, but nothing but good has come from it.
Yeah. Nothing but good has come from the non-traditional.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you as always for listening into the Stronghold podcast and joining Eli and I today. And Eli, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Great as always.
Always.